Hey, welcome to the Tim and not Gugabe podcast. We have Andrew Gombas coming. Gugabe might join. He kind of bailed on me last hour, and I can't do any other day. So I was talking to Gombas already, and he was like, "Here, I'll do it." So thank you so much. Gugabe might join in, but who knows? I should have asked Magic to join too, but it was like this all happened in an hour. But thank you for joining up. And how are you doing?
Yeah, my pleasure, bro. I'm doing well. Thank you for having me. It's going to be a good card this weekend, so it'll be a fun one to talk about.
Cool. Before we, and if anyone has any comments, go ahead. If you want to talk about any of the other fights, but we'll briefly recap the London card, and then we'll just go main card, and then you always break down with Magic. I want to give you guys a shout out. Not that you need it or anything, but you guys always break down the full card, right? And you'll be doing that like later this week.
Yeah, probably on Thursday.
Okay, on Thursday. And I'm sure anyone who watches this watches you guys, but we'll just go main card here in case you guys just need some, early discussion in the week. But UFC London, how did you do from like a betting perspective? I think I kind of talked to you, but before the card, but how did you do?
Yeah, I did pretty well. I had 3 bets tracked. I had Pogues, which lost. I had Duncan, which won, and I had Bruno Brazil, which won. But I also had some Stolyarenko, some Alvarez, some Muradov on track. So I 5-1 on bets, which was great. And yeah, the Pogues fight kind of sucked. He came in super heavy and just didn't. I didn't think he looked like how he did on tape, but kind of that's the risk you run when you're betting on fights like that. So it's always bound to happen. But how'd you do? I don't know if did you end up pulling the trigger on anything? I know you liked
I was
Marcos.
like, I gave Marcos away on the gambler's perspective on Fight Pass, but I mean, I didn't even think he won, so that kind of, just like whatever. So if people tailed that, great. But I didn't. I thought Grant. It was still really like the first 2 rounds were really close, but I thought Grant won like the third, and then I feel like you have to give him one of the first two. But other than that, like no, I don't know. I'm kind of a pussy and selective sometimes, and that card like generally my reads went like 50-50 anyway, so it would have been like a push. But I should have played Stolyarenko by sub. I even said it on the podcast. I'm like, that's the only way to play the fight. Like, I guess she could have maybe wrote out a decision, but like she still is dangerous on the mat, and McCann has just really been awful there. But good job on Duncan by you. I did not see him winning like that dominantly. He just dominated that fight.
Yeah, I just thought it was like a crazy market correction. Like Duncan came into the UFC and he was priced as a favorite against like a solid mid-tier guy. He won that fight, and then you have Ashmaz on the other side who was plus 250 against Sam Patterson and got like a 2-minute knockout, and then all of a sudden he was lying closely with Duncan. I was like, this doesn't make any sense.
Yeah. And then what was Aspinall? He's so like I don't know, just like him being a really dangerous fighter for a round or so, that's just going to win him 90% of fights. And like, it's just like at any other weight class, you can't get away with it. So, like, my first reaction always wants to be like, he's not that great and he's overhyped, but like, he's going to do that to probably 80 to 90% of the division. I do think like a Jones would be hard to just go out there and knock out because, like, even people who don't like Jones, it's like he's never been dropped before. So I don't think he would beat Jones, but I am like he's a talented heavyweight. Like he's like very, very dangerous. I still want to see him in an extended fight, which I'm guessing he'd probably slow down a bit. Is that kind of like what do you think generally?
Yeah, how do you think he would do against like Pavlovich?
I feel like I would have to pick the guy who is more past to victory. He could actually probably take it to the mat. And then on the feet, it would probably just be like a war. Like either guy could knock the other guy out, I'd assume. Seeing like Overeem do that to Pavlovich on the mat kind of makes me a little nervous about Pavlovich. But I mean, he defended first layer takedowns against Blades fine, but Blades didn't do enough. He went for like a takedown. So
yeah, I bet Blades there, and I was like, Jesus Christ.
What about this? We'll get into the 291 soon. Did you think Wood? I thought the price is pretty close. Like I feel like I'd probably favor him like minus 200 in a rerun. I feel like he's always a little chinny Wood, but he's a really skilled fighter. Like he can get hurt, but he's good. And he had that like leg kick upside. Did you kind of see it the same way?
100%. I felt like Wood minus 185 was probably like dead on. Yeah, like 65% because Feely did have a big moment and he is bigger. But like going into this is my thought process going into it. I'm like, Feely's bigger, but Wood is a little bit better technically, and he has the leg kicks, and he's just kind of like a little bit better of a fighter. And I think he had a speed advantage too. So I was like, it's probably a semi-close fight, which it ended up being like 29-28. And yeah, that's probably about how I'd line it in a rerun.
Yeah, I'd probably go like minus 200. I feel like that's fair. I've always like been higher on both of those guys. Like I like Feely's a pretty good fighter, and Wood is very skilled. So yeah, Wood can make the. Is he ranked? I don't pay attention to rankings. I feel like he could probably make the top 10 at featherweight.
I don't know if he is yet, just because I think he just moved up to feather. I think this was only his second fight at featherweight.
Yeah. All right. Well, and then was there anything else? I'm just looking at that card now. The Craig fight was cool. I almost picked Craig straight, but I decided not to just because of like. But I talked about on my breakdowns. I'm like, I know Muniz has the top position, Pat, but Muniz defends takedowns at 41%, and Craig is kind of underrated. Is like he can get takedowns every now and then. Like he even took down Ankalaev in that one fight, even though he shouldn't have won that fight, other than the guard sub. But he's like a sneaky little takedown guy occasionally. Craig's funny. I'm all about him. Like he just always wins, I feel.
Yeah, no, he's great. Like a guy who just shouldn't have as much success as he does, and he just does it.
He's beaten Jamal Hill, Ankalaev, and then Krylov. Like 3 of the top 5 heavyweight or light heavyweights in the world.
Do you remember was it Kennedy and Zekchukwu like 4 years ago or something like that? I remember I bet Paul Craig by sub, and he just like was throwing up subs the whole time. Like he couldn't like get any grappling going.
Kennedy too.
Yeah, and yeah, and then in the third round, there's probably like 2 minutes left or something like that. He just like threw a sub up, and I remember I was like watching with all my friends in college, and we were just like going nuts.
Oh my god. Yeah, I forgot he even subbed Kennedy. Like I remember that fight now that you mentioned it, but that was like on a hill. Yeah, but then he's funny. I was talking about it in the pod last week. He can legitimately maybe lose to a guy who's been doing MMA for like 2 years, I feel. But then he could also beat like world champions. Like he is like the lowest floor and highest ceiling out of any fighter ever. It's really
100%. I mean, he subbed some like solid guys, like you said. Obviously, like Ankalaev was crazy, but he also has like you know Carl Moore and Bellator's like
yeah.
Kennedy he submitted. Like Shogun, he didn't submit Shogun, but like he beat Shogun even though he's past his prime. He was like a former champ, like Jamal Hill, champ, Nikita Krylov. Like it's just hilarious.
Who is the best bet? On that card, I'd probably say like Leron Murphy because he just dominated. Like Stoliarenko, it's like you had the price, but we didn't see every version of the fight play out. Like maybe she gets the early sub every time, but like maybe not. Where I feel like Leron Murphy just kind of, I picked Murphy, almost bet him and decided not to. I just felt like Kulabau used to be underrated and now he's kind of overrated, like type of thing going into that fight.
Yeah, he used to. I think you nailed it. Like he used to kind of fly under the radar. Like I even remember, like betting against him early on and thinking he might actually be pretty decent. For me, it's tough. Like Stoliarenko, I had like a really bold prediction going into that fight. Like, I said the striking is going to be a lot closer than people think, and it only lasted a couple minutes on the feet. But like Stoliarenko is winning the striking. Like I was like, she has all the grappling upside. She's the bigger girl. She has the finishing upside, especially early. Like I just kind of felt like that fight was not. Like, first of all, McCann's not what people think she is. And second of all, I don't think Stoliarenko is either. People are like, oh, she's 1-5 in the UFC. But, like, you kind of peel it back a layer further. She had a competitive fight with, like, Alexis Davis, who's, like, a solid all-around fighter. She fought Chelsea Chandler, who's, like a 145-pounder. She, like, Stoliarenko is just not a real 145-pounder. And so I kind of felt like validated for having those opinions after the fight. Like once it got down to the mat, it was crazy. Like she took her down easily, she took her back easily, she got an armbar. Like I don't know what people thought McCann was, but I probably think it's one of those two between Murphy and
then okay, well that's everything. We'll just shift right in to UFC 291. We'll start with the main event. We'll do it that way, and then we'll just go down main card only. if anyone wants any other prelims, we can just talk about it briefly. But other than a betting perspective, what do you think of the whole BMF belt? Just from like a fan, I kind of think it's dumb, but it's a way to make money. It's fun, I guess, but I just don't like that. I talk a little bit of shit on both of these guys, and I'll clarify, but it's like they were both finished by Charles Oliveira, who's in the same weight class like a year or two ago. I don't get that, but what do you think of it, like overall, as like the concept of the BMF?
Yeah, like I get what they're trying to do. Like they're trying to say, oh, these are the guys who, put on fun fights and they fight everyone. But at the same time, it was kind of like if it were up to me, it would have been a one-time thing with it was fine when they did it for Nate and Masvidal. Like they kind of like legends of the sport in the sense where they both have like double-digit fights in the UFC. They fought the best of the best. Like I got it for one card. Like they have The Rock or putting the belt on, whatever. Like it was fine, but like it just went away for all these years, and now it's coming back. And I agree with your point too that like, and I know we've talked about this before about how they haven't really fought like all these guys in the division that are like very good. That they kind of fight like a cycle of each other. I'll give Gaethje a little bit of credit because he fought Fiziev and he actually beat him.
True.
Like, yeah. Poirier, who's the last guy like Poirier fought that like is in the like actually in the mix as a contender. Like he fought Chandler, who's like good, but he hasn't fought the guys like the Jalen Turners and the Brad Riddells and the Sarukians and the Gamrots and like all like kind of like that next stage, I guess, so to speak, of like fighters at that weight class. Like he had a war with Dan Hooker a few years ago. Dan Hooker kind of left the weight and came back, and he's not really like a top 10 guy. And particularly, he hasn't really fought any grapplers. Like I've always been low on Poirier's grappling. Like, there are guys who I think would dust him. Like I actually think Gaethje's a harder matchup for some of these guys than Poirier, even though Poirier is like the favorite and like
in this matchup.
It's a styles make fights kind of thing. Like for example, like I actually think Gaethje is a good defensive wrestler on the feet. Like once he's on his back, he's not very good, and I don't particularly trust his cardio. But I think his first line of wrestling defense is like very good. So I think some of these guys would have like a hard time with him. Whereas Poirier, I feel like you kind of chain a couple shots together and you put him on his back.
Yeah. No, it's like I've always said that. Like I feel like Chandler, Gaethje, and Poirier kind of just like round robin each other, and then they'll like try to go after a counter fight or a title fight. Or like I don't know, and then I guess like two of them beat Ferguson too. I feel like there's just like a tier of guys, and it's been going on for a couple of years. So like I can't blame them, but I feel like it's more on the UFC should do something to allow guys like Sarukian. Like Sarukian's the one getting fucked here, the most. To give them an opportunity. So I don't know. Yeah, and like I agree. I picked Charles to beat Poirier because
me too.
I was not the best defensive grappler, but
and also none of them have fought Dariush.
Yeah, that's another one. Yeah, for sure. And I do agree with Gaethje being like a tougher matchup against some guys. The only problem is when Gaethje's actually grounded, he's not very good on the mat. Yeah. But as far as like this matchup, what do you think? Like I think the lines moved a little bit in Poirier's favor. I'll give you my thoughts after you, but do you lean Poirier? Do you lean Gaethje? Who do you think is going to get the job done?
Yeah, it's not a confident take for me. Like Poirier, I get why he's the favorite. Like if you just look at head strike stats, like obviously these two have fought before, and like not a lot about their game has changed. But the only thing you could say is like Gaethje's like got a little bit better technically. Maybe he takes a little bit less of a wild man approach, but Poirier is still the better boxer, better technical striker. It's just the only thing that could get funny on the Gaethje side, or I guess the Poirier side, I should say, is the leg kicks of Gaethje. Like Poirier was definitely feeling those in the first fight, and it's a little weird because typically when you have an orthodox fighter and a southpaw fighter, the leg kicks don't do as much, but he had Poirier's leg very funny in that fight, and I know that Poirier outlanded him to the head by a lot, and I think that probably happens again here. But I do think that it's hard to lay this kind of price on Poirier where there's a world where Gaethje lands 7 leg kicks and all of a sudden Poirier is walking funny. So it's like my least confident opinion of the card, pretty much, which is funny because it's like the main event. There's a striking fight. I don't really think either. Like, I don't know. I saw a comment that said, do you think Gaethje will go for takedowns? Like maybe he mixes in a couple, but he's not like a huge top threat. He's not a submission threat. And I don't know that he has the cardio to wrestle for 5 rounds. Excuse me. So yeah, I think it's primarily going to be a striking fight. Dustin Poirier, better head strikes, better boxer. Gaethje has the leg kick upside. I think it just ends up being a war like the last time. I know you like Poirier a little bit, and I definitely get why. I mean, if you were just to show me the head strike stats, like Poirier by far, but
Yeah.
I do think the leg kicks could get a little bit funny.
Yeah. Yeah, like I like Poirier. I put him at minus 130. Like if he gets to like minus 170 or beyond, no, like I'm not gonna play that, and that's like a decent implied probability shift.
Yeah,
I
for
will
sure.
just talk about the first fight. Like Poirier outlanded him to the head 142 to 56. And if
Yeah,
you
that
look
was
at
a
their
lot.
historical metrics, like Poirier outlands everyone to the head. Even like Oliveira, he did. Oliveira outlanded Gaethje to the head. Pretty quick fight, so you can't completely go there.
Yeah.
But I just doubt Gaethje can like cover that. And I'd go in striking fights. I do like the people who land you the head more. But I do hear you. Like in that first fight, I kind of do think the commentary is being a little biased because the first two rounds, I thought Poirier won. Like of course they both landed a ton of strikes, but Poirier outlanded him 174 to 115 overall. I still thought Poirier was up kind of considerably in the first two. Like, of course, Gaethje had moments, but he just like it was all leg kicks, and like I know there was an impact on him, but like Poirier's very very tough, and he's like a guy I feel like can fight through something like that. There's other guys I feel like will crumble, but Poirier's very very tough, and eventually, like he just hit him to the head too much, and Gaethje went down. So like overall, I favor Poirier. I do think Gaethje's changed his style, but I almost feel like I was talking to Gugabe about this offline. I almost feel like Gaethje going back to like him going in a precision boxing match with Dustin probably isn't a good idea. I feel like he
Yeah.
almost needs to go aggressive with leg kicks and kind of just
Mm.
go after him. I feel like that's the way for him to win. Like, because he could have maybe won that fight, but I
Yeah.
still lean Poirier. But I just feel like if he tries to go technical, do you think that plays into Poirier's favor? Just, I feel like Poirier's a better boxer.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely not a bad idea to try to be a little bit better technically defensively, but at the same time, I think making it a brawl is probably in his best interest. Like, go out there and just throw a shit ton of leg kicks, try to get Poirier kind of planted on the back foot a little bit harder. So, yeah, no, to your point, I don't think that playing the technical games necessarily the best idea, but I do think just maybe being a little bit tighter defensively, if that makes sense.
True.
Poirier
Yeah.
can crack, and like Gaethje does get hit to the head a lot.
Yeah. Like, and the Gaethje still hits hard. And even in round 3, he landed one really good shot on Poirier. Like, so, like, that could have resulted in a knockout. And, like, striking is a high variance sport. Shit could happen. But I do, gun to my head, I think Poirier is going to win the fight. Like, I think he's a little more consistent to the head. I kind of, both have been knocked out. I do feel like Dustin might be a little better. Even in fights Gaethje wins, he gets hurt a lot, And I just feel like Dustin's probably going to hurt him at some point. I trust his chin a little more. But any props you like, or do you want to move on to the co-main event?
No, I typically don't have too many props, so my answer is probably going to be no for all of
Okay,
those.
cool, same. So that's good. All right, co-main event, interesting fight. I feel like you can go. I have a couple sharp people who I like talk to, and they'll be on opposite sides here. I'm not opinionated about this fight personally, but what do you think here, Alex Pereira and Jan? Do you think Jan's just going to take him down and go to wrestling and dominate on the mat, or how do you think this fight's going to play out?
Yeah, this is a very interesting fight. Like when I first broke this fight down, it's a very tricky matchup. Like on one hand, you have Jan Blachowicz, who's 40 years old. He's probably not as good of a striker as Pereira. But that being said, he does a very good job of checking leg kicks, which I think is one of Pereira's best weapons. And also he has this grappling upside where it's like the big question mark, will he grapple? How much will he grapple? On the Pereira side, you've got a guy who's moving up to 205. He's a big one. He was a huge 185, so he'll be perfectly sized here. He's coming. I haven't seen a lot of people talk about this, but he's coming back very quickly from like a brutal knockout.
True.
Like,
Yeah.
very quickly. Like that was in April of this year, and he's coming back at what is that? 3.5 months? May, June, July. Yeah, 3.5 months. And yeah, like I don't think his grappling's very good. But Jan kind of waited until like he might have taken one shot in the second round against Adesanya and then kind of really wrestled in the third.
Yeah.
So it's very – I think you have to favor Jan here, just based on the grappling upside. But it wouldn't shock me if he went out there and got knocked out. And I do think he can compete in the striking. Like his striking against Adesanya was actually like very competitive. And I'm not saying that he's a better striker than Adesanya. I'm not saying he's a better striker than Pereira. I'm just saying that the gap in their striking is less than the gap in their grappling. Typically, as we know, the grappler can implement their game plan a little bit better. So I think you have to favor Jan here. What do you think?
I'm kind of like, I feel like my brains tell me like you have to favor Jan because of the grappling path, like you say, but just my gut tells me Jan might strike, which is probably a bad idea because he only shot one takedown in the first 2 rounds against Adesanya, and that could be too late here, you know? I will say Jan generally going into that Adesanya fight had really good striking metrics. He outlanded Adesanya to the head in that fight. And I played Adesanya in almost every fight until that Jan fight. And that was a fight I told people the striking could be a little more competitive than I thought. I didn't expect Jan to like do as well as he did, but he did well, you know? I still would have to favor the credentialed guy like Pereira on the feet, but Jan can crack. Pereira is a bit chinny, but I would still favor Pereira. And like, I think the issue I'm having here is my gut tells me they're going to strike a bit, especially in the first couple rounds. And that makes me really nervous. If Jan was like a Grant Dawson, where you know within 10 seconds he's going to be shooting takedowns, I'd be like, yeah, he's the side. But I just like, I'm a little worried, you know. I'm a little worried about it. I haven't looked at like props or anything. I don't always play a ton of props, but I don't know if there's anything there that caught your eyes. But I feel like we're kind of on the same page. Like you got to favor Jan, but I'm scared. Like I'm a little scared on the fight. I just want to enjoy it as a fan. I think it's a fun fight, and I just want to. I'm passing here.
Yeah, and another interesting fact is I feel like both these guys have had 5-round fights, especially lately, and this is a 3-rounder. Like, I can't remember the last time Jan, like the Ankalaev fight was 5 rounds, like the Glover fight was scheduled for 5, the Adesanya fight was 5. This one's 3, so just another factor to throw in there.
For sure. Yeah, it was a really interesting one. Like I had one dude who doesn't have a Twitter presence who's very good. It's just like one of my buddies from high school, very good. He's all about Jan here. And then I think Brett Appley, he is more like on the Pereira side, you know? So I've heard different opinions, and I see both sides. Like I understand like why someone could think either guy's going to win. They both have clear paths to victory. It does worry me that like that was a bad knockout, and we just saw like Kamaru Usman look very good against Leon Edwards for 4.5 rounds. He got flatlined and he looked a little off. He might have been injured going into that fight, but you never know how a big knockout, like, will that impact their performance or their chin? I don't really know. I tend to think they'll probably show up looking decent still, like themselves. But you really never know. So it's just another factor you have to consider. Moving on to a fight in the welterweight division, Stephen Thompson, Michel Pereira. What do you think here?
Yeah, this is another fight, kind of like the one you just mentioned, where I know people strongly on both sides. I don't have a super strong opinion on it. Like, on one hand, I think Stephen Thompson, even at his age, is still like a much better technical striker, especially at distance. But like Pereira is big for the weight. He's like 10 years younger. If anyone's going to get takedowns, it's him. Like he does have some power, but I don't know. He doesn't really commit to the wrestling path very often. And like, it's kind of hard to bank on someone to do something that they don't typically do in fights. Like I kind of have to go with what I've seen. And I mean, Stephen Thompson is a better striker than most of the division. His big issue is people put him on his ass and he can't do anything about it. I just don't know if Pereira is going to be the guy to do that. But yeah, when you're 40 years old and you have no wrestling upside, it's hard for me to lay a price on you. That being said, I am picking Thompson to win just because I do think that Pereira, I'm not counting on Pereira to do something he typically doesn't do. And I think Thompson's a better striker. I think he's the rightful favorite.
Agreed. Pereira has done a better job pacing himself since he gassed early in his career. But in a 5-rounder, I still think cardio would probably come into Thompson's favor. And I would honestly be willing to play him at -150 in a 5-rounder. In a 3-rounder, I feel like Pereira could be a little more competitive for a while, right? I tend to think Pereira won't be able to just take Thompson down and hold him down. I could see him landing a takedown, but I'm leaning towards like the winner of the striking winning the fight,
Yeah.
generally. Like there might be a takedown, a minute or two of control. I just don't think it will be enough. I think you're going to have to separate yourself on the feet. And I just have to favor Thompson there. The one thing I will say, I've always said this about Wonder Boy, I'm a lot more confident on him when people are aggressive on him. Like when they come after him, it's a bad idea and he counters you and he fucks you up. But whenever people just Tyron Woodley and Darren Till, like, should never beat Wonder Boy Thompson, but they did because they stay on the outside and they're a power threat. And sometimes Wonder Boy will stay on the outside too if he can't counter. And he's like, if he respects your power, it can be a bit of a staring contest. Could you see them just staring at each other, respecting each other a bit, bouncing from the outside, and it kind of getting a little low volume, which could make the fight even more competitive? Like I could see that scenario playing out. Another reason I hate betting striking fights is you don't know how the pace will go. Like in wrestling's wrestling, like if it's going to go there, you kind of like you can kind of predict the fight a little more. But could you see that scenario playing out, like them just dancing around, respecting each other a little too much?
100%. I mean, that's what Stephen Thompson does in pretty much every fight. Like he wants to to your point, like he wants to counter strike.
Yeah.
And Pereira probably will come forward a little bit, but like he's not as much, doesn't fight like a lunatic like he used to. You remember when he used to like do backflips and like try to like cartwheel into like a kick, and like he doesn't really do that anymore. But I would like slightly favor Thompson in a fight like that where they're kind of just standing at range, but I would favor Thompson more, to your point, if Pereira was like just coming after him, because then it just becomes like the Bull Matador thing where Thompson plays that game better than anyone. It's funny because in terms of grappling, I remember like my hot take a couple years ago was that like Gilbert Burns should be like a big favorite against Stephen Thompson.
I picked him in that fight. Yeah.
I was at that fight. Like I bet on Burns big, and like the market was going against me, which like doesn't usually happen. And I remember just being like 2 takedowns is probably the fight. Yeah. And Burns won, but Thompson actually like it wasn't I kind of expected it to be a blowout. And so that fight like skewed my perception of the next couple Thompson fights. Like I was like, if he had a competitive fight with Burns, like he's gonna kill Bilal, he's gonna kill who's the other guy that took him down a few times? Not Luke, who was it?
Holland took him down. Other than that, it's really been Woodley. Like no one tested him until Burns,
I felt like there was someone else. No, okay, so it was the Muhammad fight. That's what I was confident in.
And Muhammad dominated him.
Yeah, 100%. And so, but like that Burns fight, for whatever reason, ended up skewing my perception on Thompson moving forward, because I was like, that was more competitive than I expected it to be. But at the time, I was like, Burns is going to ragdoll him. But yeah, I say all that to say I slightly favor Thompson. I think it's not quite in the range where I would play it yet, but I am picking him to win. And especially like a fight like this, like it's hard to back a 40-year-old with no grappling upside, like in general.
He still looked really good versus Holland. The issue is sometimes it takes him a while to like get going, or if someone's not aggressive enough, he might. And like a 3-rounder, I could easily see Pereira winning the first round, and then it's like going to come down to like Wonder Boy having to clean sweep the next 2, which could get weird. If the line got to like -120, -130 on Thompson, I would probably consider a bet on him though. Like right now, -150 to 190, line seems reasonable, but we'll see where it goes. I also kind of expect it to go to the cards, but it's like -200, so I don't know. I don't really feel like it's kind of hard to call. If they just got aggressive, someone could get knocked the fuck out too,
Yeah, it's funny because typically I was thinking the same thing in Thompson fights, like, over. And then you kind of see a fight where someone doesn't give him that game where they just sit on the inside. Like the Holland fight was a war. Like the under was an amazing bet in that fight.
Yeah.
It's kind of like it depends what approach Pereira takes.
Yeah, I think it's going to depend on Pereira too. Like Thompson doesn't always set the pace. It's like whoever decides to come forward on him, that's going to be the fight. Going to Ferguson and Green. I mean, if you would have said 5 years ago that Green would be -400 over Tony Ferguson, that would have been like no one would have believed you. But we are sitting here. Do you think the line's justified?
I think the line could be even wider, honestly. Like
Oh, really?
I really don't see much of a path to victory for Tony. Like he's lost 5 fights in a row. The last time he outlanded someone to the head was against Donald Cerrone, which was four
Yeah.
years ago. He's taken so much damage. He got Nate Diaz. We would both, I feel like, agree is pretty much past his prime. Not a top 15 fighter. Like, would you
I
agree?
know what you're going to say here. Yeah.
70.
71-23.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
thought it was 73-21 or whatever
Yeah.
on head strikes. Like that's a staggering difference. Like Nate Diaz won every round of that fight.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean Bobby Green, he's a good boxer. I think he's a guy who kind of flew under the radar a little bit. I think now the market's kind of caught up to where like
Agreed.
people realize he's good. Like if you look at his last few years, it's like, okay, the Dober fight, he was outlanding Dober like a bunch before, and Dober hits like a freaking truck. So
Yeah.
Dober caught him, whatever. And then like the Makhachev fight, you could throw it out. Other than that, like he finished Ally Quinta in the first round. He dominated Nasrat Haqparast. He the last fight was kind of weird one with the no contest. I thought it was a little bit more competitive than I expected it to be. But again, Jared Gordon at this point, I would favor pretty sincerely over Tony Ferguson. Like Tony Ferguson doesn't wrestle. He doesn't have power on his punches. Like he can't land to the head. So like, what's his path to victory? Like he's gonna hope that he lands a few leg kicks here and there and like kind of runs around the octagon. And I mean, he's 38 years old. He's taken another year off. So like, I wouldn't shock me if he looked even more regressed than he already has. But like the whole thing of him just like getting his ass beat by Nate Diaz and like he just doesn't even seem like that he has that fire anymore. Like he was a guy who was mean inside the octagon, like the guy who was kicking freaking tree stumps to tone his shins, and now he's like trying to like high five Nate Diaz in the middle of the fight. Like it's just not the same guy anymore. Whereas like Bobby Green is not always like Bobby Green fools around a little bit too sometimes, but it's more of like a showboat. Like he'll say like, "Oh, you hit my shoulder," whatever. And
Yeah.
like,
Yeah. He always says that. Yeah. He'll be like, yeah.
but he is good. He is good striking defense. He's athletic. He has more power than Tony. Like I truly don't see much of a path to victory at all here. I never bet openers ever, but DraftKings opened Bobby Green the underdog in this fight with like no limits on it, and I have to be careful what I say. I was able to get money down.
I know you did too. Like I saw it. Like you showed me. So yeah.
I was able to get like a reasonable amount of money down at -120 and -150 on this fight. But like I honestly think this was playable until like -400. Like up until 80% for Bobby Green. I think that's where it kind of stops being value. But I mean, am I missing something here? Like I don't know how you could price Tony past like 15% in this spot.
To 2 points of view, I do think Green kind of flew on the radar of being a bit underrated for a while, and I cashed on him. I played Clay Guida, or I played him versus Clay Guida. I played him versus Alan Patrick, and I played him versus Ally Quinta. He was like -170 to 230 in all three fights, and I got it. I did lose on Moises, so and so I went like 3 of 4, ended up making a little bit of money, you know.
Wasn't that fight like almost not a robbery, but wasn't that controversial?
Yeah, Green outlanded him 85-42 in significant strikes. If you would have showed me the box score, I would have been like, good bet. But like Moises landed some good leg kicks and some decent stuff here and there. I do think it was closer than the box score, but Green, I think Green on MMA decisions was like 90%. So, but overall, I feel like all those 4 bets were good. Then he was going against guys were like Dober and like these other guys, and I feel like he was a bigger favorite versus Gordon than like I would have liked, you know, and stuff like that. So then I kind of got scared off. And here, like your line, great, you know, like I would have smoked that. I will say -400 though. Like I will say there. Not only like do I think Green, you talked about it, the striking, like his metrics are good and he's good to the head. He also has sneaky wrestling upside. Like Ferguson does not know how to get up anymore, and Green kind of can land takedowns. I don't expect Green to like be able to lay on top as easily as some of these other guys like Dariush and stuff. But if he got a few minutes of control in a round, I wouldn't be shocked at all. So he's a rightful favorite. I will say though, I could see it being on the feet, and I could see like sometimes Green can make like sometimes he can make fights closer than they should be. And I feel like Ferguson will at least still try to throw up volume, but I do think he'll just ultimately get outboxed. I probably wouldn't play -400 any personally, but your early line, I mean, you made a great bet. Are you gonna roll? Are you gonna free roll it, or are you gonna arb out?
No, I'm gonna keep it.
You're gonna keep it. Yeah, that's
Yeah.
probably. I mean, yeah, that's probably the best thing. Um, yeah, I haven't looked at props on that fight, but like overall, like I do expect Green to win. It's sad to see because like Ferguson, if you watch his RDA fight, like he used to be a really good fighter, and I was never on the he beat Khabib train,
Nah.
but he used to be so much better, you know, like he used to be so much better, and he's definitely like regressed, you know. So
I mean, like the amount of damage he took between like the Gaethje fight and now is like insane. Like this stuff from the opening bell of that Gaethje fight on May 9th, 2020 to right now, like the amount of damage he's taken in that 3 year span is probably like more than any other fighter since then. Like in that same time frame. You know what I mean? Like the Chandler knockout, Justin Gaethje literally like it sounded like a shotgun every time he landed a punch. Like
that was a
so
fight because like the thing is in that fight, Ferguson actually hurt Gaethje in round one. Like people forget he actually fought kind of decent in that fight, but then eventually he just got hit a little too. Like he competed well for a bit, and then he just got beat up to the head, and eventually that was a big time beating, and Gaethje just kind of fucked him up. But I will say, like he did have a decent round one versus Chandler. Like I know Chandler's not the most technical striker, but he was winning that round until Chandler took him down. And I think someone pointed that out, and I think on the cards he actually won the round, but then he got sent to Pluto in round two. So yeah, maybe he can surprise some people, but like he just hasn't looked good. And even if he's looking all right on the feet, I still think Green could just take him down. And I've always talked about I played Dariush at minus 150 over him, and he just like and it was all about the top control. And I expected Dariush to kind of do that, but yeah.
You want to hear a funny one? I bet Oliveira against Ferguson as the dog, but I bet like Oliveira had never won a decision at that point in his career. I remember I bet like half my position on Oliveira money line and half inside the distance. I was like, he's literally never won a decision before. And of course, that's like the first fight ever. He like basically snapped his arm without like finishing. I was like, come on.
Something I learned to do is like whenever I have a strong opinion, someone going to win, it's almost because I don't believe in the other guy's path to victory. So it's like I don't want to like single out a path to victory for my guy. It's like I'm fading the other one. So sometimes I just only go money line, unless if something's like stupidly off. But that's something I've learned because I remember like what was another one I did? I feel like there was something with Ryan Hall where I was like, he's clear. Like it's Derek Minner. I played him by.
No, it was the Elkins fight. I think he won a decision, right?
There's been some fights with like Ryan Hall where I like went with a specific method of victory, and I was like, what? But it was more I liked him because it's like, what's Minner gonna do? Like he's not gonna out grapple him, and like they're gonna go down to the mat. They both like to go down to the mat, and he's not gonna win a jiu-jitsu match. But I just expected the sub to happen, but it's almost like you're fading the other path to victory. Like I feel strongly Minner can't do anything. So it's like, however my guy wins, who cares? But you can definitely like single things out. What's this mean? Did he, has that stuff ever been resolved?
I've heard that it turned, I mean, I don't want to say too much about it, but I've heard
you don't have to.
I heard it turned into an even bigger issue than what people thought it was going to be beforehand, and that they're still investigating. That the FBI is investigating.
Yeah, it sounds like a mess. All right, let's go to the main card opener, Holland and Chiesa. I'll start off on this one. I picked Chiesa to win in this fight. I tend to think there's value on his line. My only issue with him is I hate grapplers who get submitted, you know, and like he can also get hurt. Like he got hurt to the body against Pettis, got club and subbed, and like Holland is at a pretty big striking advantage early. Chiesa does like do a decent job of staying out of range. Like if you look, he's landed a takedown in his last like 9 fights. Like he's gonna probably land takedowns, and he's still a very dangerous submission grappler offensively. But yeah, like I feel like he should have beat Luque. Like he should win that fight. He was winning, and then he almost tapped him. And then he's a guy who's been submitted a few times now, and that's like my concern. I'm very confident from like a round winning perspective. He can get takedowns and hold top position, but is he going to get finished in the process? And it's like one of those things. I like to fade the guys who probably need a finish, with which Holland might need a finish, or else he's probably going to get taken down and controlled a bit. But it's hard for me to cap these finishes because I'm like, this is way more realistic for Holland to get a finish than what like sometimes people think in guys who are finish or bust type of thing. What do you think here? Do you kind of see where I'm coming from? Like, do you think those takedowns are going to be there for Chiesa? And are you worried about him just randomly getting subbed or finished?
Yeah, so this is a super interesting fight, and I actually have a lot to say about this one. You have a guy in Kevin Holland who historically has, like, let's just say what it is. He has pretty bad takedown defense overall.
Yeah.
But yes, one thing I noticed, like, he's a pretty good wrestler, but one thing I noticed is he likes to get takedowns from a body lock position, and I typically prefer when guys shoot to the legs. But I do tend to agree with you. I think he's gonna get takedowns here. What makes me nervous more than anything, like most people be like, oh, like Holland could knock him out. And yeah, he could knock him out. I'm most afraid of like once Chiesa's on top, he's very good on top, but he's like overly aggressive on top. Like you mentioned, like the Luque fight, like he could probably just sit in half guard, but instead he's gonna try to immediately pass the mount. Like, you know what I mean?
Yeah. I'm a big believer in guys like getting a body triangle or sitting in like half guard. And I talked to like Grant Dawson about this because it's like whenever you go to mount, it's just a dangerous position because it brings guys' hips into play so they can escape by just being powerful. And like, but if you're in like their half guard, they can't really do much. Like you need technique. You need to go to like a half guard sweep, go to like a single leg sweep. You have to go to an actual technical move to get up. Where like if you're in someone's mount or if you take their back with no hooks in, they could spin into you. They can explode. Like it is an invitation for explosions against guys who maybe couldn't get up in the other position. So I totally agree with that. And like that Luque fight, I'm like, what are you doing, man? And then he goes right into a Darce. And like Holland is like a dangerous submission grappler. Like he has subs in his game. I mean, did he sub Jacare or was it like he had a triangle or like what did he do? I think he might have knocked him out from the bottom.
He knocked him out from bottom.
Which is very mean. I mean, yeah.
Another thing about Chiesa too, I think he does a good job of limiting exchanges on the feet. Like he's either not in range to get hit or he's like initiating the grappling for the most part. Yeah,
100%. He only absorbs 1.67 significant stress. He knows not to engage.
Yep. Yeah. That's why I kind of think my bigger concern on the Chiesa side is like he does something stupid from top.
On the mat.
Yeah. Whereas like on the feet, it's like it could happen, but at the same time, it's like he does a very good job of minimizing exchanges. Another thing too is like Holland doesn't have good takedown defense, but he's very long. Like he's a 6-inch reach advantage here, and his like arms and legs are both super long. Like he's fought at 185 before, so I think he could be a little bit tricky to get down from the body triangle from like a body lock. But I do tend to think Chiesa does get the takedowns because if you look at Chiesa's last couple fights, like Sean Brady's like a very, very, very good grappler, very good grappler. And like that fight is like not relevant to me at all coming into this. Whereas
zero.
Yeah. Like, Kevin Holland and Sean Brady are actually like complete opposites. Yeah. And then you have like the Luque fight, like Chiesa gets him down, puts him in a dangerous position, and then ends up like getting caught in a choke and a scramble. And I'm not even sure that like Chiesa still shouldn't have been the favorite in that fight. You know what I mean? Like,
well, and then he had 4 wins before that. Like I picked him against Magny.
I bet. I mean, listen,
I picked him versus RDA at plus 300.
Wow, and that's a really good one.
Underrated at this point, don't you think? Like coming off 2 losses and like Brady, and the thing is, he kind of had Brady. Like if that was a 5-round fight, Chiesa probably wins.
Yeah.
Sorry for cutting you off. If you're
no. All I was gonna say is that you mentioned the Magny fight, and I had Chiesa. Like we talked about like not betting props really. Like I bet props a little bit, but like I don't make them like official bets, and like I bet way more on money lines. And, like that's my main focus. Back when this is like a few years ago, and I was doing a lot of stuff with props. And I had Chiesa inside the distance of submission against Magny, like huge. And he was on top of Magny, it felt like for 24 minutes out of the 25. Yeah. Like just couldn't get him out of there. But that was a dominant performance. Like Magny's not a bad grappler by any means.
Yeah. No, Yeah, it's weird because then I pick Chiesa versus Luke. I've generally picked his fights well, like even as he's been the under, because I picked him versus I picked him versus Luke. I got that one wrong. I picked Brady over him, but that like Brady rightfully won, but in a 5-rounder that probably would have went the other way, and at least in my opinion. But I am picking him here. I just it's a good point. I honestly think that Holland KO might be a little bit overrated here because like Chiesa. And that was what I talked about in the Magny fight. I was like, he stays out of range, and Magny's not really a finisher, so he's probably going to get taken down. And Magny isn't as much of like a sub threat as some of these guys. Like, I mean, I guess he subbed who was it, D-Rob, but I don't think of Magny as like a sub guy. But like Holland, yeah, like it could limit his path to victory because the KO could be minimized here. But I still could see like Holland doing something dumb on bottom, like you're saying, and caught in a sub, but the fact that we're like most worried about Holland doing something on the mat here means Chiesa is probably the side at plus money. But it's a sketchy fight. It's a very sketchy fight. But I ultimately think Chiesa is just a better wrestler. And I really think like if you have a better wrestler at plus 130, and he might be more likely to get a sub too. Like he could sub Holland. We've seen Holland sub by guys like Brendan Allen who are dangerous, but we always forget Chiesa sub Dariush, which is like really impressive. Yeah. But
the one other thing I'll say, and that this is again, I'm picking Chiesa. I think he's value, all that. I just wanted to address two more concerns. Is Chiesa's like 35 and he hasn't fought in like a meaningful amount of time. Like that's another concern I have on his side. Like his last fight was November of 2021, so it's been like a year and a half, closing in on 2 years. Like that's a long time for someone. Like if he was 25 and not 35, I'd be less concerned. But it's definitely worth noting, I think, at least.
For sure, I do agree with that. Like that is a bit of a concern. Like he just hasn't been active at all. It's been coming up on 2 years. That's everything. I will briefly bring up like a couple of things, and we don't have to go hard into these. Just like initial thoughts. That's it. Lima, DeLima, and Lewis. I think DeLima could knock him out. Like I've always said, Lewis, when he's at range, is really prone. Like he's really made to like knock people out if he like gets them on their back or if they come in to try to grapple him in his range, like Blades did, and he knocked him out, But if they stand at range, like I played Cyril Gane huge versus him because, and I'm not saying DeLima is Cyril Gane, but DeLima is like good at range, especially like early in fights. But I think did you get on, and sorry if I'm giving away, but did you get on DeLima early or?
Now I'm happy to say, pat myself on the back. I mean, I blasted this line. I got like minus 125, very big. Like, I think there's every advantage here for DeLima. Like he has leg kick upside, he has grappling upside. I think he's durable. I think Lewis is a bit of a quitter. Like just
sorry, I had to throw that up because it's true.
Yeah, I give DeLima, like, would it shock you if DeLima leg kicked Lewis 5 times and Lewis was just like,
and he's like, I'm good.
Yeah, he doesn't check leg kicks at all. Like Curtis Blades was ruining his lead leg in that fight. Curtis Blades is not a striker. I mean, there are concerns. Like obviously, Derek Lewis is still like an insanely big hitter. Like he could get an early knockout. I just think you can't price it more than like, I don't know, 30%, like for like an early knockout. Because I think the longer this fight goes, like DeLima is either going to be on top or he's going to be landing leg kicks. And the more leg kicks he lands, like Derek Lewis is not going to have as much power when he throws. So I think this price is a lot more accurate than the one I got.
The funny thing is about DeLima, he's never been knocked out in the UFC. He's always been submitted. He's been submitted like 7 times. Probably not something Lewis is going to do. So that's maybe. So he's not a guy who's he's stood with a lot of heavyweights and hasn't been knocked out. But I ultimately think, he's gonna like give him trouble from range. And I do feel like if he doesn't put Lewis away and starts to grapple and maybe gets tired and then ends up on his back or something, Lewis Lewis is very dangerous when like. Wasn't it Marcin Tybura he knocked out because like Tybura was going for takedowns, went to his back? Like when Lewis actually gets on top of someone, he can hurt them. That's what I think would happen if Lewis won. Like something, which just sounds weird. You wouldn't expect to like think Lewis would win later in a fight, but I feel like if DeLima starts only going to wrestling and it's like maybe a little of afraid of to like exchange kind of later in the fight. Maybe Lewis could do something, but I like KO one for De Lima. I want to look at what it is because I think he's gonna like tee off early. But do you think he's gonna grapple or strike? Maybe a little bit of both.
I think maybe a little bit of both. And this is a funny stat. I literally just was looking through my record while I was like talking to you. I had no idea, but I've actually bet on De Lima like so much throughout his career. Like
you and Gugabe.
Do you remember Adam Wieserek? I don't even know how to say that name.
Yeah. The he's like a Polish guy. He's like a guard guy, right? Is he Polish? I forget where he is.
I don't know, but I'm looking at my record right now, and I bet De Lima at plus 190 against him. That was the night that Cormier fought Derek Lewis. And then I bet him against Ben Sassoli at minus 145. Like, if in retrospect, these are just like absurd lines. I bet him against Ben Rothwell as the dog. I bet him against Ivanov, which is the only one he lost that I bet him on, but I thought he deserved that decision. I bet him against Arlovsky. I bet him against Waldo Cortez Acosta, and I'm betting him here. So like, that's probably the most I've ever bet on someone. That was like 9 fights I just named.
He's sneakily your boy.
He's my boy, and hopefully we get one last ride here.
Well, yeah, like at minus 200 now, it's kind of like I'm not really as interested, but I think you got on him early, which I mean, yeah, like him, if you get on him and Green early, sit on those tickets, you know, like you crush the closing line. But yeah, that's everything. I'm so tired, so I'm gonna roll. But I think there's a couple other comments about some other fights, but I have somewhere to be. But Andrew, thank you so much, and check out Andrew and Magic. They have a good show. It's usually on Wednesday, Thursdays. I'm sure Magic will be victory lapping Alvarez as well, you know, so that will always be fun. So check them out. And thank you for covering for Gugabe. And I'm going to give him a lot of shit next week if he makes it, you know. So thank you so much. Is there anything else you want to say, or are you good to go?
No, thanks, bro. Good luck this weekend. And thank you guys for tuning in.
Cool. Thanks. I'm going to end the broadcast, and thanks to everyone for watching.